I didn't. It's just connected.
Right, welcome everybody who's in the room here at Brumbies HQ, and also a wider welcome to those that are joining us online. Hopefully our technology stands up through the course of this presentation. So I guess over a number of years we've been getting feedback about having accessibility to education nights, either due to shift work or time to travel. So this year we'll be putting on 4 of these sessions to try and improve that accessibility and get our education a bit further reaching than it has been. For those of you who don't know me, Shane Barr, I'm the Southern States Match Officials Manager, so I look after Victoria, ACT, Tasmania and South Australia. And I guess we'll work our way through these sessions during the year, but our first one tonight is based around the Scrum. We're fortunate to have Ruaidhri Murphy with us from Brumbies, so I thank him for his time this evening. I think one thing that's important is quite often these education sessions, there's a feel that they end up being targeted at sort of first grade level and second grade level, and we miss out on that sort of community aspect of what we're trying to do. And look, in all honesty, when we're talking around Scrum, and even tonight with Rory here, there'll be a little bit of that around this particular session. Certainly there'll be some takeaway for community level stuff, and we'll try and get that through where we can. But as you can see with some of these other sessions that we'll see throughout the year, hopefully there's an opportunity to get that involvement and more community-based stuff, and a little less of the first and second grade refereeing in terms of our education. So just further in terms of Scrum, look, I think tonight we're really here to try and peel as much information out of Rory as we can about what he's trying to achieve as a coach. What we'd probably like to avoid is getting down to the nitty-gritty of what's happening at sort of under 15 level on a Saturday in terms of, you know, core shape here and that sort of stuff, and what do I do in this situation. We'll probably stay a little higher level than that throughout the course of tonight, and try and glean the information from Rory what he's got to share. So over to this guy. So Rory's represented Ireland at schools level, at under 19s and 20s level. Before he made his way back out to Australia, had a stint with East Tigers in Brisbane, then made his way down to Canberra, where he had a stint with Gungahlin, but more importantly with the Brumbies, where he earned 29 caps, a combination of a loose head prop and at hooker. Then moved back to the UK and had some stints with Exeter and Ulster. So good pedigree. Unfortunately, his finger decided to throw in the towel for him, and that kind of brought an end to his playing career. But thankfully he says, he's moved swiftly into coaching, and you know, he's had some stints locally as well as with Canberra Vikings at NRC. Right now, he's a scrum coach with the Brumbies and the forwards coach with the Junior Wallabies. So a pretty meteoric rise for Rory. So I think without further ado, we'll get into what we're trying to cover tonight. And I think our best way of kicking that off is just to throw to Rory and just give us a little bit about his philosophy when it comes to coaching and what he's trying to achieve out of doing that. So I'll just throw it to you, Rory.
Awesome. Thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate it, and girls. So I appreciate the opportunity to come in. And I suppose this isn't about education at the highest end and what we're trying to achieve, but I reckon our Scrum philosophy and how simple it is really transferable across the grades. So it doesn't matter. I've just been to St. Eddie last weekend and done a Scrum session with them. The content we're trying to educate those boys with at first 15 at school is exactly the same. All right, if we can get the habits in them, we can teach them the same content, the expectations and what we're trying to achieve. I reckon it's going to be very good for the Brumbies to start with because our pathways align, but the messages are simple and I reckon they align well with what referees are looking for in terms of stability, balance, clear and obvious pictures, all right, and then rewarding dominance. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll see that our system produces all those things. And at the moment, 3 games in, I'll be pretty happy with where our Scrum is. If anyone's seen the Super Rugby games, 3 rounds in, starting to come alive with some of the stuff we're trying to achieve. Just in terms for me, I want to get rid of this notion about Scrum's been a dark arts. I know they've been part of the game forever. They've changed rules 100 times. The Scrum is not a dark art about angles and putting your head in dark places and stuff. We need to stop talking about that. The Scrum is a simple scientific problem about who can create more pressure as 8 to go forward. All right, if we think about that, all of a sudden we think about it very differently and we start talking about body shapes and things like that. What actually creates the most pressure individually and collectively to go forward? Because if that's for us on a Scrum to deliver ball and move forward, then there's a scientific reason why we can create more pressure than another team and move forward. That's how we view Scrums and that's what we work towards every week. So for me, you see it on the board, there's 4 stages to Scrums. We call the setup everything that is up to bind, where transition happens and all of a sudden binds are on and refs ready to call set. That for us is setup. All right, so very simply, all we're trying to do, and I'll keep coming back to this later and explain more about it, but if this is the outcome we want to achieve, if this is what we deem perfect in the position that creates the most pressure to go forward, our setup and to bind has to get us as close to this as possible. All right? In order for that to be stable, there has to be the least amount of foot movement as possible, because every time we lift the foot, we become unstable. All right? And then in order for it to be repeatable, it's got to be something that everyone knows they're part of the puzzle, and then they only have to do their job. I think very often Scrums talk about, oh, we've got to all 8 push hard. Fuck no. Pardon. I promise you, if 8 blokes know the same message and they just look after their individual part, the collective will look after itself. All right, so we talk about assigning roles to everyone and just let the collective result happen. All right, and that's massive for us. So like I said, set up everything from crouch to bind. Every team you'll see has their own process on how we get there. All right, we've changed ours this year only because it's the way I like to coach it and transition from Dan Palmer. But the concept, we get there slightly different, but it's the same. Feet square in the ground, be as close to this as you possibly can, and I'll go into the reason why we're square in the ground. Loaded and balanced, and then just waiting for the set call to release us, and then get into the second phase, which we call the point of contact, or the set call from the referee. The point of contact is our first chance to get across the line and make the opposition change from this type of top view into something that we want to create, where there's angles and disparity and foot movement in their scrum when we hit them. All right, so we talk about there being an invisible line between both packs every time. Our pack is going to be perfect, land in this shape and move forward on top of you every time. If we move forward, there's foot movement, there's angle changes from them. Our collective 8 moves forward and we're almost there. Perfect setup, win the point of contact, the scrum is just about done. Because if I can get you from standing straight to being hit and getting you to step this far, we've almost done it. The minute you take your feet out of the ground, you can't push, we win. So this is massive for us. The third thing is everything that happens before the ball in. Again, if that point of contact is very good and we move forward, that period is short, because I guarantee we're putting the ball in. It's not hit and go, it's hit, squeeze. If that advances ball comes in, we're stable, we're looking for clear and obvious pictures for refs that say they're in control but they're edging forward, which is fine. What you can't have is scrums that go bang, 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 and run. It's free kick, and I'll take that on the chin. But our philosophy that on the point of contact we want to bend and make teams move is perfect, because if that does happen, ball can come in straight away. If not, it's about how synchronized can our 8 be to then get through that point where the ball has to come in, because now hookers have got to hit the ball. So we have to have a reason or the ability to create timing where we squeeze and protect the hooker when his foot has to come out of the ground. We just said if our feet aren't in the ground, we can't create pressure, we can't move forward, but our hooker has to destabilize the biggest foot up. So how do we protect that at that point? Win ball and then still produce the outcome that we're looking for. If we win the point of contact, that period is very simple. You move forward, edging, ball comes in, easy, hardly has to touch it. It becomes more difficult, more technical, and that doesn't have to happen. We don't have to bore you with that. But for us, that's a massive phase. From when we set this ball to ball in, we want to make that as short and as accurate as possible. And if not, when we have to dig deep, we're working on timing and how synchronized we can be to make sure that's still clean, to deliver the ball to our team, which is the scrum's only outcome. Last thing is that whatever happens after the ball comes in. So after the ball comes in, it can be a mess. Who knows what's going to happen? But again, I'll bring you back to this, because if we can hold this position, if we can keep our feet in the ground, and again, we'll talk about why square is important, but we talk about square as our body shapes are always square to touch lines. So sometimes that'll move laterally, sometimes it'll edge forward and back, but what we're always trying to achieve is body positions up the field. If we can achieve that, feet in the ground, retaining shape, and just to put it simply, out scrum them, we'll always get the result we want. And it's that simple. Be stable and balanced setup, consistently in the same position, aggressive and angry at the point of contact to achieve what we want. If we get that straight away, ball is in and we're away. If not, we'll synchronize with how we feed the ball, and then through that last phase, hold this, feet in the ground, stay square and out scrum them. We'll get everything we deserve. It's really simple and ripped back, but I promise you, that's what scrums are. It's not dark arts, it's not angles, it's nothing like that. Who can create the most pressure forward, and we believe that system does.
So what did you, sorry.
Beautiful.
So what do you mean by win the point of contact without it being pushing past the mark?
So it is a contest, right? So two teams are separate and you're asking them to hit each other. Someone has to win that line. We talk about us winning the line every time. Because if this is perfect, we might as well jump straight into this because it's perfect if you want.
Well, can I hold you?
Perfect, 'cause
Let's just get to it. So if we could just hold for a second there, please, Dennis, and we're going to get to that. So, Rory, just a quick question though, in terms of tactically around the field, probably something that we've given some consideration to about, state of the game, who's under pressure, who might do what. Anything in that for you?
No, so we actually went through this before. We probably thought, we want a loose head screw on this, we want a tight head screw. Our process, whether we're in our bottom left corner, under the six attacking, in midfield, is exactly the same. Why? Because this process creates the most pressure to go forward. The only thing that ever changes is when we decide to play the ball out of the back of that. It's that simple. If that scrum's moving forward, 8's in control of it, I guarantee you we're going to continue scrumming. If that develops into a penalty advantage, we're playing. Our attack's going to try and light up. If it doesn't, if it sits there, we don't waste any time because we don't want to sap energy out of that one that we haven't won properly. We go to the next one and we'll have exactly the same checklist again. So no, that doesn't change.
Thank you. All right, we might move on and let's just get into the first stage. So if we think about that and we just turn back to our perspective for a little while, we'll take away from Rory. I guess in terms of setting up, from our pre-match to the first scrum, all that sort of stuff, we're sort of, overarching, making sure that everything's in a position that we're going to have a safe outcome. So making sure that we nail that is one of our key drivers. But we always talk about stability, and I think Rory will talk a little bit about balance, but certainly for us, we're looking for that stability at each step that we go in that setup that we're trying to own. So, at crouch, we're looking to make sure that, we've got our heights matched, and again, we'll talk about the perfect shape in a second, but looking for that sort of stuff with height and alignment, so being square. So we're looking for that at crouch. And then when we get to bind, so this is all in Rory's setup sort of phase at the moment. At bind, we're looking for that legal bind. So we're getting passed onto the side or onto the back on that jersey and making sure we keep there throughout the process, right? And then also a bind, making sure that we've got that gap and we can see that these guys are balanced and they are supporting their own weight. So they've been, you know, in our sort of checklist for a couple of years now since we've gone to this call. So back to you, Rory. You know, what's in it for you? What are you looking for at this sort of setup stage?
Yep, so again, I reckon balance is our key word here. And again, balance means that we can repeat the process over and over again. Like I said, collectively, everyone's got to, the collective looks after itself, but individually, we speak about everyone's responsible for their own balance. So if I'm balanced, that means the bloke behind me only has to look after him, the bloke behind him at 8, oh sweet, everyone in front of me is balanced, I just look after me, all of a sudden we're all balanced, and then it's very simple. Right, when you get into problems is, you see teams who locks are holding props on edge, and you see a prop who has to touch the ground 3 times to keep himself up. He is not balanced and he is not stable. That's not repeatable, and it's not going to help him when ref calls set and wants to engage and move forward. So we talk about, very simply, it's all about balance. We know where we're trying to go. As an individual, you look after your balance, and the collective will look after itself. As we transition the bind, I told you, every time the feet comes out, we become unstable and we release pressure on them. But the modern game, through this bind sequence, there has to be some kind of foot movement. So whether that's locks, props, reshuffling, that's going to happen. All we want for that to happen is as quick as possible and with as least steps as possible. So if that can be 1 step, that's perfect. As long as that foot is in the same place every time and we give them markers for where that needs to be, we'll be fine. But balance is the biggest thing, because if you're balanced at setup, the point of contact can then come. An unstable setup will never win the point of contact, guaranteed. If you go down through that step, we'll never achieve what we want a point of contact if we're not balanced and loaded at setup. So it's massive. It's the first thing on our checklist.
Good. All right, so we're moving to set now. So this is your point of contact, and I guess from our point of view, this is where we're looking for those cues of making sure our head and shoulders are where we want them, making sure that people aren't getting long and overextended, and still looking for that squareness is what we'll be looking for from a refereeing point of view. But I think this is the crux of what you want to talk about now, right?
Yeah, I reckon these 2 diagrams, I'm just going to use these because I reckon it sums it up pretty well. I've told you that this produces the most force to go forward, and we're going to talk about the reason why. And then the last one's square. If you think about this as a scrum, 8 blokes pushing lovely and square. The aim of the scrum is to go forward. So we call this the common mark where we're all trying to get to, or the common space. If all of us are square, we're balanced through setup, we win the point of contact and edge there, that's perfect. Where we come into problems is where all of a sudden, and you'll have seen this before, the loose head can't keep his hips in and ends up on this angle, or a tie head gets folded in and it looks like this. Yep. So all of a sudden that common point, where's that scrum actually trying to go to? Where do they have the ability to go to? Because I guarantee you, if this bloke's like this, his flanker looks like this, he's locked, trying hard not to look like this, but he is. Agree? So we're no longer square. All of a sudden, this half of the scrum is trying to go this way, this half of the scrum gets trying to go this way. Where are they going? Who knows? They'll hang on for dear life. I'm going to have to clean that up, Shane. If we do that on the flip side, just bear with me for 2 seconds. This is now us. If we can create on the far side, through the point of contact what we spoke about, loose head can kick his hips out, brings his lock to here, the flanker will try, tie head's doing an okay job at the moment. Right. So we've now created that image on the other side. What we've done is actually made them very unstable and given us options. If we continue to squeeze pressure forward and collectively to a center point, very simple. So if that's where we get to on the point of contact and we squeeze further forward, that angle becomes more like this. His lock's out of the scrum, has no chance. He's under all sorts of pressure. He'll probably be on the ground. All of a sudden, our scrum, by just creating square pressure, has got rid of half of their scrum. half of their scrum can no longer push forward and stop us from moving forward, we've achieved everything we want. It sounds simple, but by going through the point of contact square and in shape, this producing the most pressure, we create everything we need on the other side. Then it's just a battle. We talk about that fourth stage, holding this, keeping your feet in the ground, out scrumming opposition. Everything just becomes exaggerated and we cut off parts of the scrum. We're not trying to achieve angles, pressure changes, anything. All we're saying is we're going to be as honest and as square as possible, but by creating the most pressure possible. It's pretty simple. The reason why this creates the most pressure is a number of relationships in scrums which are really important. Everyone say that? You haven't? So number one is the relationship between shoulders and hips. This is massive. You've probably heard 1,000 times flat back. Yeah, want to see a flat back or flat back. This produces the most force because anything that happens in behind you actually goes forward. Again, it probably sounds very simple, but can everyone understand that? Yeah. Problems arise where all of a sudden a player loses his back up and looks more like this, in that same shape. Yep, so for us, this is a waste of energy because we're no longer pushing pressure forward. We're wasting our pressure and transferring it up and over the scrum. That's not going to help us get forward. The same thing, I think it's called hinging for refs. You see shoulders way below hips. Pressure's getting wasted down and into the scrum. That'll end up on the floor. It'll end up bent in half, move his feet. So this image, relationship number one, flat back means no matter where else you're wrong, we'll talk about this in a second, anything that happens behind you, you have the ability to go forward. The second relationship is hips and knees. So this one. So we educate players about a heavy 1-rep squat and where they feel the most comfortable. Anyone who's been in the gym, when they deep squat, at that lowest point, they all feel miserable, right? So when we're in a deep squat, if you imagine in the scrum context, a player looks more like this. All seen that, where he gets caught and he gets on top of himself? Yeah, he's miserable. Right, so he's absolutely miserable. What he will do, I guarantee you, unless he's really brave, step his feet out to try and look more like the original clip, the original picture, but like I told you, the minute he moves his feet, can't push, releases pressure, he's in all sorts of trouble. And then if you can imagine the reverse of that, everyone feels comfortable. I could probably hold, I don't know, what's heavy? Heaps of weight. If I just had to stand up, if I didn't actually have to squat it. So you see the other guy who gets really long and lays out to protect himself. Again, this bloke no longer has the ability to move forward. If he does move forward, that becomes even more exaggerated. He's unstable, can't transfer pressure, and it's the same thing. So this optimal, what we call perfect again, is roughly 110 degrees. The closer we are to that, we know we have the ability to move forward, or if we get caught, we have the ability to absorb some of that pressure, but retain it so anything that comes on can still go forward. If we understand that through bind, we're trying to get as close to this, at set, we're trying to look like this, and at the whole time through the scrum sequence, no matter where it is, the closer we look to this, the more pressure we're creating. And again, individually we want to look like this, because collectively we'll look like this if we get it right. Pretty simple.
So then Dennis, back to your question then, about how do you get that to not be the hit and chase thing, Rory?
Well,
so back around that balance sort of thing, right? So even at set, you're still looking for that balance position, right?
Yep, so at set, if you imagine this, at set, if we do go forward, if we say that we're going to be as close to perfect at bind, and at set we go forward, instead of looking like this, perfect, if we do go forward, we may end up long. So what we're saying is we don't want him to move his feet yet, but if that guy does step and he feels pressure release in front of him, we will allow him to move his feet and get back to that perfect position. So we call it winning the point of contact because really all we're trying to do is make him step or change angle. If he does that, again, like this isn't an infringement. I was talking to Shane about this earlier. I think the most important, well to us, that's not an infringement yet. He has done nothing wrong but squeeze past the mark. It's what he does next. So if that continues and he just lays out further and further and further and becomes long, then he's at that point unstable and you can infringe him. He's gone forward, but he's unstable, so that's a penalty against him. But there's nothing wrong with me winning, squeezing. He steps, chase my feet back to this image. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want to achieve.
Yeah, so your definition of winning the hit is just to get them to have a movement without moving your feet. So that's what I'm trying to define is what you're calling winning the hit, or winning the contest, it's point of contact.
Yeah, if we can make them step, change angle, but like, imagine there's also 8 angry blokes on the other side trying to achieve pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
But we know the importance of the result we get if we win.
Yeah, so Rory, one of the things we look for is you just use the phrase chase the feet, that's one of the things we look for.
Yep.
So I guess you're saying you'll get him once there, make his hit, take his sort of half step and adjust if he needs to, and then not go any further for him. That's your legality there.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone knows you can't just hit and run over teams anymore.
Yeah.
Because at some point it has to stop for a feed to happen. But I reckon if you look at how close scrums are, if you look at how competitive most scrums are, especially at this level, the actual how far, I'm probably overemphasizing what winning the line means. It might be this far, but I'm telling you that pressure change from perfect to all of a sudden I'm short, I'm miserable, take a step, we win. If that tie head, if that loose head moves, we win. It is small margins.
Good halfback will get the ball in that.
We'll talk about that. 'Cause Shane watched our scrum today, 100%. Our philosophy, everything I'm trying to, if we can actually edge the point of contact and be stable, that ball can come in. There's no reason why it can't come in. Because you're seeing stability, you're not seeing a team run over the mark and try and just chuck it under the locks. You're seeing angry, perfect stable, put it in. There's nothing there. Again, balance, stability from us.
Right, mind if I jump in here with a junior question, Shane?
Yes.
Rory, we've done a bit of coaching with the juniors. We're thinking probably a bit lower, sort of 13, 14, 15s.
Yep.
What would you like to see a referee do to help out at that sort of 13, 14, 15 age range, particularly with the variances in height and weight? What could we do as referees to help that?
Yep. I reckon weight's gonna be tough to handle. All I would say to him, if there is a massive disparity, is that heavy kid is gonna use weight and just run forward. He's unstable and free kick him and educate him why he's been free kicked. He can't use his weight to just run forward. Space will be a big thing, so less space, safer probably. Yeah, I would say.
I think it's a good question though, when we're really back here at head and shoulders, right? Getting that, making sure our head and shoulders align with our hips, that's going to be key. And typically where we see errors coming, or poor shape coming in, right? You see a big kid that's sort of bent right over. Getting him up into that shape is going to be key.
So you'd almost suggest a junior referee's the first thing you're looking for is that shape. We could educate them and say, if we can get players in that shape, that's the best for safety.
Well, I think the balance bit is important as well.
Because a big heavy kid who's all of a sudden knows what this is, can produce this, and it's creating a massive disparity in the two scrums. Again, you just have to. He has to become stable at each part of the scrum. He can only move 1.5 meters or whatever it is, half a meter. So there's rules there to protect how far he can be dominant. But I mean, we should get excited about a big kid who can produce this. Send him to me. Send him to me if you find one. But I reckon make him show you he's stable. So whether that's attack or defence, closer is going to be safer. Yep. It'd be hard to know otherwise.
So we're on to this section that you're calling before the ball. So, from our point of view there, we're looking for that stability. And I think, there's some interesting chat going around about what's stable, what's hit and chase. And I think that's an important thing for us to get right in our head. Then, of course, we're looking for that alignment from 9 and getting a credible feed happening. And then, we need to be making sure that our hooker's getting a strike. So at least some effort to get that strike in. So I think Rory's already touched a little bit on this, but is there anything you want to add to this sort of section, Rory, about what you're trying to achieve as a coach?
I just think if you think about the same system we're trying to produce, like I've told you, if we do edge it and it's stable, that ball's going to come in. Every team will do that. If it edges forward, they'll get that ball in because it's tough. But think about it from the reverse side. If we can make an opposition hooker feel under pressure his prop step back, he feels squeezed, we know he has to strike the footy. So again, that's 6 inches that you can move forward, makes him go, I actually can't pick my foot up. That ball, referee's going, put it in, Nines will put it in, I guarantee you. They'll just throw the ball into the middle of the scrum. If he doesn't hit it, we haven't actually moved forward, but he can't strike it, that's our ball. So again, a small margin by being good early can produce a massive outcome.
Yeah, so Barry, you've already alluded to it before. So for the guys that struggle with stability post-set, and the halfback wants to feed the ball, how can we as referees control that situation better?
Yeah, so good question. I'm going to ask you to answer it yourself, Brodie. What's something that you do to try and manage that situation where you've got that hit feed straight away, where we're looking for at least some stability?
So I think if we run into instability post-set, we can't control the feeding ball. We don't have the tap on the back for the halfback when you get it in. So it comes to your pre-match on how to lay that down to the halfback and say, look, the tunnel's yours to start, but if there's instability, I'm going to step in the way. And then when I move, then you can feed the ball. So if you're struggling with stability post-set, just tell the halfback, once I move out the way, then get the ball. And that's how you can control it as referees now.
I'm going to ask you what you think about that, because I think you've probably got something else that you want to add to that, right? Or if you don't, that's fine.
But it's hard. I reckon if you look, for referees especially, the biggest cue I could give you is just look at the front row. I reckon you can get obsessed by what's happening too far back in the scrum. I promise you all errors feed back. So if there's an error in the front row, it'll cause an error down the chain. Nothing the 8 does is going to affect the front row, and really the infringement should be here. So I'd focus at the point of contact. I'd be looking for, I think we had it if you want to go back, because this is how I'd manage it. Are they head and shoulder square? Does one team move forward and gets long and unstable, or rolls out of the scrum? Do they hinge and lose shape? I reckon they're your easiest cues for managing the point of contact for instability, because all those things will create instability. Yeah, slowing the feed down, yeah, I suppose it's not going to, but who's causing the instability? Penalize him, don't worry about the feed, there'll be some stable.
So I think that's a great response, hey? I think, you know, if we're getting that instability in this section that we're talking about here at 3, then maybe we should be looking about what's happening at 2, okay? So let's try and sort something out that's happening in the step before. But reasonable to manage if that's our last resort, right?
And I also reckon if you think about it from how I think about it, if there's instability at the point of contact, rip it back. What did the setup look like? Like, is there an unstable prop? Is one scrum just moving forward just as you're about to say set? They're all little keys that I can guarantee will help that decision make it become easier.
Good. So we're up to party time. Ball's in. You know, so I guess these are all things we're looking at from our refereeing point of view. We're still looking to make sure that everyone's square throughout. Then we're starting to look at who's collapsing, who's bailing out, is someone shortening up bind and cranking, those sorts of things. Anything that's sort of giving us the indication that they're in trouble and getting in, right? So that's where what we're looking here at this stage. And you know, it's important from our point of view that we're rewarding legal dominance, so making sure they're square throughout and keeping that sort of that balanced picture that you're talking about there. Rory's touched on, you know, anything that goes wrong in the front row just transfers back. So keep working hard on those front row cues before you get too excited about moving your focus back. And then naturally, if we're safe enough and we can play advantage, Rory's already said that one of their things they like to do is once they've got that advantage, then they'll have a crack and see what they can do off that. So we should be trying to facilitate that in terms of our game management. But mate, is there anything you want to sort of add at this section? I feel like you've built up to this section, right?
Yeah, like what we're trying to achieve here is the same thing. Hold this, keep your feet in the ground, out scrum, stay square, because we know that produces the most pressure to go forward. Like it sounds like a peak, but it actually does. So it's very technical. That, like I told you, that could be, that scrum, we're trying to achieve the same thing, but could be moving laterally under pressure. There's nothing changes. We want to stay square because at some point we'll cut off an angle and we'll be able to move forward. This is hard. I reckon refereeing this is the same thing though. Like like I showed you, I think like the errors will always come from the front row. So I know you've got to keep an eye on where the ball is for advantage and resetting or just play away from it. But the errors and what will be penalisable or whatever you want to call it will happen in the front row. So don't get obsessed by how where things are happening in the back. If you go back to this, the perfect front row, I guarantee your locks will stay square. You lose a loose head like this, his lock won't have a clue. I bet you he looks like this because of it. Flanker will look like this, and then if anything happens, if he ends up on the ground, rolling out, hinging, it's him. He can't stand the scrum, guarantee it. But again, the cue is there. He gets kicked out, loses his hips, his lock follows, flanker hasn't got an option. There's your cue from the front, it's not happening behind him. I guarantee that. Square prop, like a square lock.
Right, so that's the four sections that Rory's looking at, a little bit of what we're looking at the same time. We're going to have a look at a couple of quick videos in a second, but I might just throw it open to some questions that you guys might want to ask now while we've got Rory. And then we might get to a couple of quick clips, but there won't be an excessive amount there. Oh.
So, Rory, your team's losing the point of contact.
Yep.
What do you change?
So I guarantee you we'll never win a point of contact if our setup is wrong. So the first thing I'll address is I'll just look at setup. What's causing us not to get forward? It could be that we don't have enough space. It could be that our locks are too long, too short. Front rows, same thing. They're not close enough to that perfect profile again. But you'll never win the point of contact unless your setup's right. And then at some point, right, that's actually right. So where's our attitude? We're just not up for it. Because you can G it up enough that it'll go. Yep.
Yeah, with that check, 110 degrees on the side view, feet on the ground, how far apart? Or whatever's comfortable for the player? Or for
it's going to be very different. Height, how he squats, flexibility. I would be less worried about where his feet are. If the profile looks good, he can be feet together. He's all right. Yeah. He won't be.
Yeah.
But for you, it's up to him.
But generally, shoulder width apart, sort of.
I don't know, whatever feels athletic for the player, I suppose. Like wherever, if this is a squat, turn horizontal. Wherever he squats, he should be just about scrumming. Jack.
To what extent do you change your game-to-game tactic depending on the referee and how they manage the scrum?
So I'll fire it straight back to you. From what I've told you on how we scrum, if you were previewing us and going, right, I've seen that, that's how they scrum, what would you say to us? Same, yeah, square images, earn the right to move forward, can't hit through the mark. As long as you stay square, we'll reward dominance. It's everything is part of our drill. Do we adjust to refs? Yeah, you have to be wary. Like some refs are trigger happy on early push, instability at the point at setup. Again, you've seen us. We'll balance the setup's massive for us. Repeatable, same over and over again. So we don't want that to be us. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, but again, belief that our system creates the most pressure to go forward is where we start every week.
Yeah, just a quick one. You've got the play advantage if safe to do so. One thing here for you guys becomes critical as far as safety, and when you're going to say, no, I'm not going to play advantage there because that's unsafe.
That's nothing to do with that.
I guess there's a couple of things that we're concerned about. We spoke about that disengaging standing up thing. So once we've got that stand up process and then driving that back, I'd start to get pretty concerned at that sort of picture. And the other one is the sort of collapse where they fold in and get their head buried in the ground.
That is a dangerous one. But you're talking about a Super Rugby game, that's still a moment to show you're dominant. Like 100% juniors, that's Mayday, stand up, release, everyone relax, and that's for you, 100%. But like a collapse scrum, that's unsafe. Happy if you can't see the ball, blow it up. I'd have no issues with that. We'll go again. Both sides happy.
Is it also very much a judgment call by the referee who's there at the time? Their best position, I would say, I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And consistency, I suppose, as long as I'm saying consistent, we shouldn't end up on the ground. Why are we on the ground? We know we're there.
All right, we might just, I'll get Rory to drive for just a quick second, just through a couple of quick videos. What we might do is, I'll just move this mic over to where he's going to sit. He's going to roll through a video. He's going to just ask if there's anything that you're seeing or concerned about, and then he might chime in with what he's seeing and what's not what he wants or exactly what he doesn't want.
That's loading.
I'm not going to say.
Cramp, apparently.
So, I'll let it go.
So we've now applied, so that for us is everything to set up. Thoughts like that, they're also very good. They're a clean scrum at setup. We knew that was going to happen. They've got a slightly different process to us, but to achieve the same thing.
Anyone concerned about anything at this stage? Early days, everything looks pretty reasonable from our point of view, right?
Yeah, well,
37 of the last.
From our point of view, happy with that outcome?
You have to adjust the speed. Problem the right have to adjust the speed because the problem on that was dropped his body weight and started to collapse. And therefore it started to.
so tight head black becomes unstable, so we adjust in front of him.
I think there's. You can watch it from the other side as well.
Yes, it's very low on this side.
There's a good looking flank on the side.
Thoughts? We're just zooming in on the video.
Has he what?
Is he like holding his
Yeah, so legs and midgets, so he can do it.
Why don't we just, we'll just listen to what Rory's got to say here, so.
Just watching it from the reverse angle, just because there's probably an infringement on this side.
I guess it's got to have a positive shape, right? Exactly that balanced shape that Rory's been talking about, so.
So we actually have lost the point of contact here. So we haven't achieved what we wanted to achieve, which means we have to go to the back end of our system, which is now hold shape, scrum longer, feet in the ground, out scrum them. We now fix, and Leslie gets really good weight on top of him, so he's now bent him the other way. So vertical bending works the same way as angle. So he's now bent him over, which he's now forced him to hinge with pressure, which has put him on the ground. Yep.
Is that the joys of having Leslie whose legs are half a foot tall?
Yeah, it helps. That does help. And again, there's no foot movement from us. There's constant pressure to get out of a poor engagement, a poor set process.
37 of the last.
That's good outcome.
So it's a scrum actually, Rory, you lost the hit, still won the penalty, you must have been pretty happy up in the box with it.
I was here, and I mean, it looked better on Slips' side, it looked better.
Yeah.
You look on the reverse, we didn't get forward, so I'd be asking Leslie why. But setup looked reasonably clean. I would say he's probably short though. But Leslie's short, but he can get short because he's so strong in the squat and deadlift. But when he's a little bit longer, he's better.
I'll just do one more play.
Beautiful. Tell me why this isn't a penalty.
This time,
But again, really good stability from both sides. The setup process is clean. 8 players all loaded, ready to scrum. Watch the set call, the point of contact. And you're asking about the feed. Look at Perinara. He's ready to put this ball in. He's not waiting for anyone. If this is stable, it's going in. We knew that. There's 7. So it's a small movement, but we inch that. So it's good contest initially, but we do squeeze through.
So I think that's a good example of what Rory's talking about, right? It's not this massive movement forward, but it's enough to show that they've got there.
And then again, just referee the front rows. Forget how pretty it looks elsewhere. Referee the front rows. So if you're looking at front row this side, like that's an assistant referee's call. He's like ref's blind. But we'll go to the far, even if you watch at the far side. See Scotty CO working hard to stay square to touch lines at the moment. So that scrum has gone down on the far side and it's moving laterally. We all seen that. He's now staying square as possible, which you spoke about. Still trying to stay square, still trying to stay square.
If you go back to the...
Just before we ask this question, I think what we might do at this stage is just call a close to the webinar, and we'll bring up that sort of stuff up, and then if there's any further sort of stuff we can continue on with that. So I think, Jamie, is there anything else we need to add to that? So just thanks to Rory for coming in. I think some great insights there, and it's good for us, you know, in terms of our game awareness to have some idea of what those guys are trying to do. And having the advantage of being at the scrum session with Rory this morning, I can tell you that they're exactly the messages that are getting transferred to the players, and the players are very clear about what he requires from them. So, mate, thanks heaps for coming in and spending some time with us. It's invaluable for us. So, thanks to Rory.